Welcome to Money Talks, a weekly feature on FM 93.5 The Berg and WMEG AM 740. Today we will talk just a little bit about money, maybe some of the things you can do with it, how it can impact your life, some ideas on financial planning and investing, and getting the most out of the money you hope to have, already have, or want to pass down. So sit back, relax, listen, and maybe take some notes, as you may have some questions by the time we're done with this edition of Money Talks. Hello, Dan Joss. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Good morning. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. We always talk about great stuff, and sometimes we have to talk about the downside of things. And the downside of some things is people passing away, and the best way to get the proceeds from an estate to the recipients without a lot of other issues along the way. So can we talk about that today, Dan Joss?
We can. It's something I talk about with many of my clients. There's a couple key terms that you should know, and then there's some principles, and we can talk about one or two of those just depending on how much time we have today.
Okay, well, good.
First term is called per stirpes. It means by representation or by class, and the second term is called per capita, and that's by total head count. And so, of course, these are legal terms. So talk with your estate planning attorney about them, but the concept of per stirpes is everyone in the class, so all the next generation, get things equally. So that if someone has 3 children and each of those children have 2 children, that first class would split an inheritance 1/3 each. And even if one of the children predeceased the person, their parent, then their 2 children would split 1/3 that their parent would have gotten. And we could use that same example of 2 surviving children and 6 surviving grandchildren and say if we did it per capita, then everyone would split it all the same. So in essence, the grandchildren would get as much as the children. And so those 2 terms mean obviously 2 very different distributions, and those all change depending on who's living or who's living at the time, or what class or where they're at in the lineage.
Okay.
And by default, a state has one of those, and so check with your state to see. But probably more important, talk with your estate planning attorney and put your plans down so that your documents, whether a trust or a will be reflective of what you want to do and not default to some state legalese.
Yeah, we want to make sure that things happen the way that we want them to, not necessarily the way the government wants them to.
Right. And a good estate planning attorney will kind of talk through, because we can make our best plans, but great estate planning attorneys talk through what ifs. What if this and what if that, the things that we don't plan for. And so while most people think attorneys have boilerplate in their documents, it's very important boilerplate. And the good attorneys have very good boilerplate because they've talked through and they've lived through these what ifs that happen that we don't plan on.
Right. And of course, just because they're an estate planning attorney does not make them the brilliant estate planning attorney that some people need. And so it's maybe a good idea, just like a financial planner, to talk to a couple of different ones before you settle on one.
Yep. And you'll meet them. They'll do some work for you, and then you'll go back and you'll adjust things. I recommend my clients go back to talk with their attorney every 5 years or so, because things change in our lives, and either 5 years or 10 years, some significant things will have changed, and maybe more importantly, state or federal law will change in every 5 or 10 years. And so it's important to go back to see if the plan that you have still works, if the people that you've named are still living, if it's important that they are living, and just make sure that the plan is what you want it to be and really up to date.
That makes good sense because there are some rules that do change from time to time. Occasionally we have new presidents elected and legislatures elected. So, yeah, having those checkups, perhaps not as often as going to the dentist, but and perhaps as painful. I don't know. But you got to go and you got to do these things to make sure that at the end of the day, you're smiling bright.
That's right. That's right. And I have I have a few principles and so in future talks, we'll go through those principles one at a time and see how they apply to your estate. And it's always a good conversation to have.
Okay. That's good stuff.
But as a primer, how about inequality of inheritance?
Right. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that if there's more than one person in the inheritance side of that, there's some inequality. And
so it's important to talk about if it's not equal to each of the children, which is what many estate plans do, why it's different, and how the thought came about, so that there's good feelings instead of bad feelings about why decisions were made. And we can talk about that more in depth in next time.
All right. Well, that sounds good, Dan Joss.
Okay.
I appreciate it. As always, it's been a great conversation. And if you would like to have a conversation with Dan Joss, what number should somebody call?
They can call me 757-903-2127 or my website, jossfinancial.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan Joss. We appreciate this always valuable information, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Money Talks is a weekly program presented for the listener's benefit and entertainment. It is provided at no cost to the listener, and the ideas, opinions, and comments are not to be construed as legal advice, tax advice, investment advice, or other advice specific to the listener. Listeners are encouraged to seek the advice of a licensed professional or other qualified party when dealing with financial, legal, tax, medical, investment, insurance, taxidermy, plumbing, electrical, carpentry, real estate, chiropractic, veterinary, oral hygiene, hot air ballooning, etc. We have given you some food for thought. Now, call a licensed professional such as Dan Joss at 757-903-2127. Thanks for listening, and remember, failing to plan is planning to fail.